Today we are going to talk about books I reread, and in particular what I learned from rereading these books. Because it's one thing to read a book one time and enjoy it and really get into what it has to say, but it's another to go back knowing what it's going to say and then notice those more important details, get to that deeper layer of understanding. And I find myself wanting to reread books more and more now because it feels like to me a lot of the stuff that I'm reading, maybe it's novel, maybe it's said in a new way, but it's something I've kind of stumbled upon. It's something that reminds me of something else. So, why not spend time with the books I really love? Why not go back and revisit and see what I missed the first time? And I feel like that's a whole new avenue of exploration, a whole new avenue of study. And let me know your experience with rereading books and things you've learned. But that said, we'll get into the first thing, which is Siddhartha by Hermann Hesse. I actually reread this, I think, last week as part of the members only stream. We do a members only book club and talk about different books, and it's been fun so far. And that's a lot of the reason I've been rereading stuff, but I've felt the urge to go back to other stuff. And so Siddhartha is just a simple story about a man wanting to find more to life, a man knowing that there is something else, something that he's not tapping into, and that there's some deeper level understanding to life that he can come across. And what really struck me about this book this second time is Hermann Hesse doesn't necessarily denounce any of the teachings that Siddhartha comes through. He doesn't necessarily denounce the asceticism or the Buddhism or the need to kind of become somewhat worldly in the sense of seeking physical pleasure and all sorts of stuff. That he treats this as a necessary stage of development for Siddhartha, and in fact, it's really the whole important aspect of it. And to me, there was really just a reiteration of the idea that life needs to be lived. I think that's really the main lesson that I took away from rereading Siddhartha, and I was really pleasantly surprised in how he approached certain problems, how he dealt with certain topics, how he said just enough but not too much to kind of take it in one direction, whereas he kind of leaves it open-ended. He kind of leaves so that the reader really fills in the gaps with their own mind. And the second reading of this book, I gained a whole new appreciation for it. The first time I read it, I liked it. I don't want to say that I despised it or anything like that, but I was like, well, I've just read better books, but I understand why he set it up this way. I understand why he structured it this way. I understand why it didn't feel like he was saying all that much the first time I was reading it, because the whole point of the book is you're supposed to read it and understand that you're supposed to find it. That he's not going to give you the path, that even if he gave you the solution, you wouldn't understand it, and it's something that you just have to come to your own sort of experience in order to grasp what he's trying to say. And it's one of those books that is short and sweet and has a whole lot of things to be learned from it, and I certainly learned a lot from a second reading. So with that said, we'll get into the next thing. And the next thing is something I've talked about extensively, which is Self-Reliance by Emerson. I want to say there's a handful of quotes that I will repeat time and time again because I think they're so important to understand at their essence. And I think if you just understand those quotes, you'll understand a lot of life. But I probably cited Self-Reliance like 100, 200 times throughout the course of my videos, but up until recently I only read it once. And again, I was doing a members only stream where I was talking about Self-Reliance, and I went back and reread it. And the more I read it, the more I was like, these are all things that I've always kind of understood, and I felt like Emerson didn't quite talk to, but on a second rereading I understood he had much more depth than I thought he originally had. And what I'm trying to say is, I said it very poorly, is that things that Emerson spoke about in Self-Reliance that I didn't notice the first time, and things I thought I found in other stuff was already in Self-Reliance. And I think if you want to figure out where you want to go in your life, if you want to figure out who you really are, I think it's essential for you to read Self-Reliance, because in those 14 pages, it will teach you more than anything else ever could. I simply think that Self-Reliance is one of the most important essays to ever read in terms of your own individuation, your own individuality, and becoming your own person. And, a few quotes from it are, wow, I'm blanking. No, I'm just kidding. To be yourself in a world that seeks conformity is the greatest of achievements. Plato, Socrates, Pythagoras were misunderstood. To be great is to be misunderstood. And all sorts of quotes like this that really teach you about the depth of experience and really teach you about who it is you really are and your capacity and what you can really come to. And the things that I feel like were reiterated in Emerson's essays was the importance of doing things by yourself, doing things for your own sake, not doing things for the sake of others, not doing things for the sake of an end result. And this is something that I really try to put in my head, because this is something that's so essential to creativity and doing anything that is not conforming. Because if you do something in search of the results, then you're always going to be chasing the results. And things that chase the results are the things that don't stand the test of time. And what do I mean by this? Think about a movie that is just looking for box office dollars, and they just do everything that would normally do that, such as fancy marketing, such as, a lot of action and stuff like that. But the movies that really stand up and the movies that are really seen as the true classics and the really great films are the ones that don't try to please anybody, that don't try to reinvent the wheel, that don't try to do something that is so astounding that it's a marvel and you have to go see it. No, it just tells a good story. It hits at the psyche of man. It hits at the collective unconscious. And in some way tells a compelling story that we can all relate to. And, that's something I really try to reiterate to myself, because I can come out here and make videos and I can chase views and I can do all sorts of stuff like that. But even if I got success like that, I wouldn't enjoy it. And I promise you that. And that's what I really want you to start grasping, is that do things for the sake of yourself. Do things because you enjoy them. Do things because you believe it brings you closer to the person that you want to be. It's not necessarily bad to have an end goal. It's bad to fixate on the end goal and fixate on what comes from that end goal. But put yourself in the right direction. Look at that vision. Look at that idea. Look at that image, and imagine yourself capable of it. And then start taking the steps to get there. Don't worry about what the world is telling you. Worry about what you tell yourself. Don't go out and act as if you need the results in order to get that sort of sensation. This is why we fall out of love with our hobbies. This is why we fall out of love with the things that we do. This is why we become disillusioned by the world. It's because we're so concerned with the damn results that we forget why we're doing it. And why we're doing it is because we love it. And that's really, really, really what I think I missed in this essay the first time, and what I think I wasn't ready to sort of understand, because I always had this belief that I wanted to be different, but in trying to be different, I was still trying to prove other people wrong instead of trying to prove myself right. And there's a big difference between what I just said and proving myself that I can do these things. I can, show to my spirit. I can show to my soul. I can get closer to who I really want to be. I can, in some way, come to some sort of self-acceptance. But in trying to please other people, I'm just doing what everyone else is doing. And that's really the trap of individuality. That's really the trap of doing great things in this world, is that we become so ingrained with the things it provides us that we forget why we're doing it. And why we're doing it is because something needs to be said. Something needs to be done. I need to write a certain poem so that people can feel the same thing that I can feel, so that people can get to the same insight as me. I'm not doing this for the sake of a mass audience. I'm doing this for the sake of humanity and for the sake of myself. And that's a big difference between trying to get success. That's a big difference between trying to obsess about the end goals. Oh, if I don't get 1,000 views on every single video, then I'm this, and this. No. I'm having fun making this. I'm speaking about subjects I enjoy speaking about. I'm doing things I otherwise would be doing in my own mind, but I'm just expressing them outwardly. And that's really what I want you to understand from this. And that's really the lesson that I took from this. But again, Self-Reliance is one of the best essays ever written. It will teach you everything you need to know about your soul, about your psyche, about who you need to be. And if you take this essay and if you apply it to your life, and if you really embrace its core tenets, you're going to live a great life. The next thing is The Marriage of Heaven and Hell by William Blake. And it was always one of my favorite works, but rereading it, I feel like I got a whole deeper understanding of Blake. And I feel like the more I read of Blake, I feel like the more we align in terms of our beliefs, in terms of our ideals, in terms of what we aspire to be. And If you're not familiar with William Blake, basically his idea is that imagination is the expression of God, and that through expressing our imagination we can liberate humanity of its chains. And what do I mean its chains? I mean convention. I mean the sort of worldly church that says war is okay, that is, turning a blind eye to various vicious things that happen in its name, and all sorts of stuff like that. And I think Blake is trying to return to a more holistic way of life, a more imaginative way of life, a more freeing way of life. And to Blake, to conform yourself is to enslave yourself. And the only way to break this chain is through the imagination. And with that said, the entire work of The Marriage of Heaven and Hell is to try to get us closer to that and try to reassure us that it's our imperfections that make us beautiful is a good way to describe that. And the title is not misleading. The Marriage of Heaven and Hell is the idea that hell needs heaven and heaven needs hell, because without this juxtaposition there's no sort of necessity. And really what I learned the second time is that Blake is trying to kind of call out convention, call out sort of the traditional ways of thinking things, make himself seem like a villain, but speak truth in the same essence, so that you have to be confronted with these realities of life. And one of the greatest examples of this is, it's like the road to asceticism is paved through excess. It's something, there's a quote like that. And really what Blake is saying is that if you have never experienced too much, then you'll never be able to accept enough. If you have for your entire life never had the bare minimum of things, when you have the capacity to have things, then you're going to go overboard. Think of the rappers, think of the athletes that when they get any sort of money, they immediately spend it and blow it right away. It's because they've never had these things before, so they don't know how to act with it. They don't know how to appreciate these things. They don't know how to be smart with their money, because they're just falling victim to that idea, the more things I have, the more I am. And it's a very kind of backwards way of thinking, but it's something you can only learn the hard way. And that's essentially what Blake is saying, is that there's these eternal lessons in pain, that there's these eternal lessons in suffering. And in fact, our suffering is not what makes us bad, but it's what makes us good. If everything you did on a daily basis was perfect, then what is the point to do anything? But it's the fact that we're not righteous that makes it, when we're righteous, something noble. And it's the fact that we are vindictive. It's the fact that we are evil. It's the fact that we have the capacity to do wrong. And in fact, the world rewards you for doing wrong. And we do right in spite of that fact. And that's really what Blake is trying to get at. And this work is interesting because you can see it definitely really, really influenced Aldous Huxley. He wrote an entire book that kind of ripped off one of Blake's most famous quotes. I'll pull it out right here. But The Doors of Perception, and this is a very interesting book in and of its own right. But the quote goes, "If the doors of perception were cleansed, everything would appear to man as it is, infinite." And what Blake is talking about is when we free our imagination, we free humanity. When you are able to imagine, when you're able to be unbounded by the whims of society and the past actions and the way of doing things, then we are able to sort of find a different path, find a different solution. But when you say the only way for me to be successful is for me to do this, this, and this, then the only way for you to be successful is that. But we always have to give credit to the imagination. We always have to give credit to the outliers and credit to the people that do things differently. And that's really what Blake is telling you to do. He's telling you to be an outcast. He's telling you to be different. He's telling you to break your own chains of enslavement so that you can free the rest of humanity. And it's just, I really love William Blake. There's something so fascinating about his writing. I mean, the guy was probably crazy, but it's the most crazy among us that are the closest to God, I would probably say. But with that said, we will get into the last thing, which is Psycho-Cybernetics, and this is the deluxe edition. I don't know if this makes any difference, but this is a book I reread through going through it with you guys. There's an entire playlist of me going through every chapter of this book, but this book very shortly is Dr. Maxwell Maltz, and it was written by Dr. Maxwell Maltz, but he was a plastic surgeon. I don't know why I can't speak right now. It's only been 15 minutes. Normally I ramble for much longer. He was a plastic surgeon, and he realized that the biggest differences in his patients weren't necessarily the physical alterations, but the mental alterations. There is a very funny example in this book where he had this salesman, and he thought his nose was huge, and every time he would be about to close his sale, he would get self-conscious about his nose, and he would basically self-sabotage. But when he fixed the nose, he became the top salesman of the company. It goes to show that who we carry ourselves as has so much more effect than we even understand. And if we can carry ourselves as something more than we are, then we can aspire to be in the right direction. What I really got from rereading this book was the essential nature to reframe things. The essential nature to take things that we see as negative, that we see as something that's contradictory, that we see something that is bad for our career, or bad for this, or bad for that, and flip it on its head. Because as Emerson said, I know we're citing Emerson again, but there's no such thing as a bad quality that's not also good. And there's no such thing as a good quality that's not also bad. And think about it this way, it's Napoleon complex that made him such a fierce general and such a fierce conqueror. It's Caesar's ambition that led to his death, but also led to his rise. And I want you to understand this as well. It's like your biggest setbacks could be your biggest inspirations. And I think that's really, really what this book does so well. And I think that's really what this book is so adept at getting across. And I like how it doesn't necessarily go into the mystical angle of things. It doesn't necessarily go the Neville Goddard path, or trying to think of a good example, like reality transurfing. I don't think it goes into those ideas that we don't oftentimes like to give credit to. I think it keeps it fairly agnostic, and I think it keeps it fairly psychological, which really appeals to the most amount of people, and people just won't outwardly dismiss it. And I think that's why it's one of those books that I just recommend, because it puts things in terms that we aren't going to immediately throw up our hands and go, well, I can't listen to this because I don't believe in this. And I think that's perhaps the best element of this book, is it talks about things that are, there's a deeper layer of mysticism in it, but it puts it in a purely materialistic kind of lens, and that's really what I enjoy about this book so much. But it also talks about the idea of visualization, the idea of telling yourself you're good enough, the idea of telling yourself you're worthy, and how these little facts, how these little shifts in your mindset are going to begin to open yourself up to new possibilities and new attributes about yourself that you didn't yet have. And it's tremendous book. I really urge you to pick this book up. It's one of the only self-help books I think that's well worth reading. The vast majority of them are just going to tell you the same thing. The vast majority of them are going to just take Emerson's writings and make it into something very boring, or take Nietzsche's writings and turn it into something very boring, and then try to sell you a course at the end of it and try to upsell you and sell you on the next book, and keep you stuck in the same place. But I think Psycho-Cybernetics has everything that you need in it to really go about transforming your life, and really go about transforming who you believe yourself to be, to put a better foot forward. And I mean, I really leave you with this last example about this book, is like, imagine going into a job interview and thinking that you're going to get it, versus going into a job interview and thinking that you're not going to get it. Regardless of the result, it really doesn't matter. But if you go in positive, I think you have a better shot than if you go in negative. And if you don't agree with that, then I urge you to go try it. I urge you to go into different social settings and act confident. And go into another social setting and act reserved and act scared, and have your hands shaking the whole time, and see how people respond to you. Because there is something about body language. There is something about the way you carry yourself and the way the world treats you based off you carrying yourself. And I think, yeah, there's a whole lot of stuff to learn and read in this book. And these are things I learned from rereading these various texts. Here's the list. There's only 4 books, so I'm sure you guys can kind of keep track of them. But yeah, with that said, I'm going to keep doing this because I'm going to keep rereading stuff, obviously. So I think it's a very useful exercise to, 1, talk about the book, and 2, talk about the things that I missed the first time. Because, maybe if you have already read this book, maybe you missed that. Or if you haven't read the book yet, then you will be able to see what I missed, and you'll be able to get it on a first understanding. And hopefully me doing this is helping you in somewhat recollecting the important parts of these books and why we read, why we reread, and yeah, let me know things you learned from rereading books. Let me know books that I previously covered that you think I didn't do a good job covering that I should reread. Yeah, love you guys so much. Peace out. Catch you in the next one.